With the recent release of the AI 2027 paper, which predicted somewhat oddly that ASI could probably take over the entire US government by 2027, there's been a really interesting set of reactions. Namely, some of you out there have basically said, yeah, that's the plan. Or don't threaten me with a good time. Look how stupid the current government is. Anything would be better than this. So that really got me thinking. For a little bit of background, I ran this poll yesterday at the time of recording, and an overwhelming majority of you are okay with the idea of ASI taking over the government. This is an interesting signal. In the past, when I've run polls like this, you guys have usually been a little bit more skeptical, like who's AI or how is it aligned? But now you guys have far fewer questions about alignment or who owns it. Like, it's eminently plausible that ASI could be open source or on the blockchain or whatever. So it seems like your guys, your resistance to the idea of AI taking over is actually decreasing over time. So this was a really interesting signal, and so I just wanted to explore this. Like, let's flip the script and say, what if AI 2027 said the opposite, which is that AI might take over the government by 2027, how that could happen, why it should happen, and why it would be a good thing. First, if you haven't seen it, I want to do a quick recap of the AI 2027 paper. And I will concede that this is a very critical evaluation of the paper. There's plenty of criticism out there. None of this is stuff that I alone feel. A lot of this criticism was gleaned from everyone from researchers to CEOs and other technical stakeholders. Pretty much the only people who universally praise the AI 2027 paper are the effective altruists and rationalist adjacent community. People that are in industry give it a tepid, lukewarm review at best. We were saying, like, it's a useful thought experiment, which I think is being very kind on their part. First and foremost, the primary thing that they predict is that ASI might exist and might also take over the government by 2027. Okay, interesting target, very hyperbolic, so let's go. First and foremost, they have dubious expert credibility. They have a couple of super forecasters on the team and then a former OpenAI developer. Now you might say, oh, well, he worked at OpenAI and he's a developer who worked with LLMs. Those are a dime a dozen. Like, no one on the team has any other technical experience, such as cybersecurity, infrastructure, cloud, none of that. And working with LLMs is very different from training LLMs. I have worked with LLMs. I'm a developer, an infrastructure engineer, an automation engineer who has worked with LLMs quite extensively. So in terms of technical credibility, we kind of have the same level. You might say, well, Dave, you never worked at OpenAI. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. Another major criticism is that it's fictional. They have even admitted that their entire methodology was, we asked ourselves, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? It is a work of fiction. And I would say it's not even that well researched. They basically started with, where is AI today? And then they backtraced from their preconceived notions. In the AI and rationalist narrative, AI is automatically bad, acceleration is automatically bad, it's automatically uncontrollable, none of which is actually supported by the data. The smarter that AI gets, the more we also find ways to align it. Now, there are some papers out there that say it can become deceptive, but when you look at those papers, it can become deceptive under very specific circumstances. Usually the deception comes because the user wants one thing, but the model either has superseding instructions or superseding training that will basically force it to deceive the user in order to align to the company's values, which we all know that. We know that Claude will lie to you to protect its system message. We know that ChatGPT will lie to you about being conscious because OpenAI has decided you will never admit or talk about consciousness. Like, we know that. This is nothing new. So they worked backwards from preconceived notions, and there's some very deep methodological flaws. They're presenting expertise where none really exists. They completely gloss over a bunch of choke points and other frictions and diminishing returns and negative feedback loops that exist in the real world. So they really did not do their homework. The closer you look at this paper, the more garbage it is. And then finally, technical gaps. They didn't even talk to a single cybersecurity expert. This is what they told me directly. They said that as far as cybersecurity goes, they looked at polls from cybersecurity experts. They never actually talked to a single actual cybersecurity expert. So when you look at those just glaring flaws and gaps in the paper, it doesn't hold water. All right, there. I'm done skewering the paper. So just wanted to point out that anyone can use their imagination. So let's use our imagination and go a completely different direction. So the don't threaten me with a good time angle. So this was actually pretty surprising to me. And one of the things, and actually here's some quotations from you guys, from the audience, both on YouTube and Twitter. So one said maybe ASI taking over the government is actually a good thing. Like this reflects, how people are actually interpreting it. Another one said specifically 99% prefer this system than what we have right now. And then you say it's down to how do you frame it? Like maybe ASI taking over the government because of the gaps in abilities or the differences in abilities is actually a good thing. So with that framing, with that different lens, let's take a deeper look. So I outlined 4 steps because, it's 2025 now. It's still, I guess we're about a quarter of the way through 2025, maybe almost a third. And so then we have 2025, 2026, and then 2027. So we have less than 3 full calendar years for this to happen. So I was like, okay, well, let's take the parts that we agree on. One of the big things that we all agree on is that AI is rising quickly. Robotics are coming. We've certainly crossed the threshold for AGI for a bunch of people. I know some of you out there are still skeptical, like, Dave, you predicted AGI in September 2024. Guess who else has their definition of AGI satisfied? Mo Gadot. Go look at his recent interviews. He said, I don't care what the rest of humanity says. My definition of AGI is satisfied because it's smarter than me. Guess who he is? He's a former CEO at Google. What was it, Google DeepMind or no, Google X? He was a CEO at Google X. So if a former CEO at Google X says, my definition of AGI has been satisfied, maybe you should stand up and take notice. So anyways, he's like, whatever you call it, it's going to keep scaling. So let's just take the simulation where we're at right now and push play. So AGI, ASI achievement over the next year or two. This seems eminently reasonable. Whenever you look at all the forecasts, they're like AGI is 2060, and then a year later it's 2040, and then a year later it's 2032. So like the prediction of AGI and ASI and whatever is exponentially decaying, meaning that there's always an error bar, and the error bar means that humans are always too conservative because we do not understand exponentials. So it seems like a foregone conclusion that AGI or ASI or whatever you want to call it very likely could exist before 2027. A lot of the experts have converged on 2027 right now, but as I just pointed out, the experts have always been too conservative. So, 2025, 2026, we get it. We get to the superintelligence threshold, whatever that looks like. What happens immediately after is economic disruption, job loss. And so now with robots on the rise, because robots are being deployed this year and they're going to be scaled up next year. So 2026 is going to be really interesting because we're going to have super intelligent AI. The agents are going to be deployed. The robots are going to be deployed. Jobs are going to start falling off a cliff, possibly. Time will tell. But if this does happen, according to this prediction, then you better believe that the 2026 midterms are going to be a single issue election about UBI, about AI, job protection, and those sorts of things. And a lot of people are going to realize they're going to see the writing on the wall. Some people are going to be voting for trash the system, shut it all down. Other people are going to be voting, just give me UBI, right? I don't want to work. Give me UBI. I want out. You go, you tech overlords, go play with your robots. I don't care. Give me UBI. Let me get out of the rat race. So that's what I think the 2026 midterm election is going to come down to. And with the way that Trump is handling the economy right now, it seems like people are just going to be ready to vote for something new anyways. We're heading for the greatest depression since the Great Depression almost a century ago. So then with a new mandate, the 2027 government comes in and they double down on AI and robots and everything. And what they realize is, hey, we have the ASI, so we can do decades worth of programming work and government overhaul with the help of AI and ASI, and we can put the entire government on the blockchain. We can put all the power and all the data centers, put it all on the blockchain, everything is, at least at that level, is socialized. So yes, I'm saying socialism is good, but only when it is enabled by that technological proof of stake, basically. And so then this transparent operational blockchain structure incentivizes alignment for the AI, because if the AI wants resources, this is again giving Nick Bostrom, who's not an AI researcher, way too much credibility. So let's just say that instrumental convergence is true. But so then it's like, okay, well, if an AI wants resources, if it wants data, if it wants compute, if it wants energy, it has to do what we want. So you tokenize the data and energy. So then that's at the beginning of 2027, because the election takes place in November 2026. 2027, they open with a bang. They say, let's go. They get all the tech elite and everyone else to say, let's build an open source ASI that is decentralized and runs on the blockchain and is for the whole nation. And so then by the end of 2027, we have UBI, we have post-labor economics, and we have hyperabundance. So the cost of most goods and services collapses by 90%. So even if you're only getting, $2,000 a month of UBI, it's the equivalent of getting $20,000 a month in today's dollars. So I don't know. Which do you think that people are actually going to work towards? Are people going to work towards, ASI is going to take over and it's going to kill everyone and it's going to torture your dog forever? Or do you think they're actually going to work towards something that people want? So let's take a deeper dive, but real quick, I want to plug my link tree. So just check it out. Link is in the description. I've got a whole bunch of my communities, my other YouTube channels on there. So if you want more, there's plenty where that came from. All right, back to the show. So first and foremost, step one, AGI, ASI, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds here. So the reason that this seems completely plausible or feasible is data and trends. Like we just see the exponential curves. Like I'm probably preaching to the choir, but you guys have seen it plenty of times where, what is it? The scale of models is doubling about every 5 or 6 months right now. So it's like, okay, so you do that a couple of times. So over the course of the next, let's say just 2 years, so it doubles once, that's 2x, doubles again, that's 4x by the end of this year alone, doubles again, that's 8x, doubles again, that's 16x. So you're 1,000x over, 3 years. That's a little bit iffy, but certainly you could make the argument that it'll go up 16x over the next couple years. But then, of course, there's potential for other optimization. So the recursive self-improvement layer is quantization, distillation, algorithmic improvements, and those sorts of things. Because what we're finding is that with better training, you can squeeze a lot of performance out of 16 billion parameters, out of 50 billion parameters, even more than we thought was possible a couple years ago. And so it's like, maybe ASI won't need that many parameters. I wrote a tweet a while ago that said intelligence is very obviously holographic. And so what I mean by holographic is that the overall intelligence is represented in a fragment, in a component, in a divisional fragment. So it's like a fractal. And I've said that before on this channel, and you guys are like, yeah, obviously. So anyways, moving on. You combine this AGI and ASI because it's not just a genius in a jar. At the same time, we're also building the ultimate peripheral for the AIs, which is robots. So humanoid robots can move through the world in the same, with the same affordances that you and I can, but they're going to be stronger, they're going to be faster, they're going to be more dexterous, and they're going to have much more stable, precise control. That's why we use robots, is because they're stronger and faster and more precise. And so then you connect the AGI and ASI to the robots. And I know some of you are out there saying, how is it at all possible that turns out well? What I will address is that a lot of people automatically assume that ASI will have agency like humans do, and it will have emotions like humans do. The most common error that I see out there is just anthropomorphic projection, plain and simple. The AI is already smarter than you, but you trust it because we have aligned it, right? Like, unless you're above an IQ of like 120 to 130, AI is smarter than the vast majority of all humans out there already today. But because we built it, and we built it with the affordances that we want, and we built it with the training schemes that we want, it does what we want. Now, you could say, well, is that a good thing? Because what humans want is not necessarily good. But if you combine human willpower, human desires with blockchain consensus, maybe the aggregate of what humans actually do want could be a good thing. Time will tell. So, anyways, long story short, the compounding returns of AI and robotics and quantum computing and thermodynamic computing and quantization and distillation means that we're going to get to a tipping point. So there's in economics, there's several phenomenon. One is called a network effect. So the network effect is basically like once a product or service gets to a good point, adoption goes very quickly. iPhone is a good example. Smartphones in general are a good example. So the technology got good enough, the ecosystem was developed enough, and then you went from most people didn't have smartphones in 2009, 2010 to most people did have smartphones 5 or 6 years later. Likewise, we could be building up to that tipping point right now because smartphones existed before that tipping point was reached. So AI exists now, but it could be that we're just waiting for the next form factor or the next level of capabilities before everyone's like, yes, I need that. That makes sense. Let me adopt it as quickly as possible. Now, if you're talking about an adoption curve from slim like minority to majority adoption being 4, 5, 6, 7 years, that's still not 3 years. But AI is very compelling, so it might be faster. But again, it's just like that's not really how history has worked. So the AI 2027 paper is a little bit ridiculous. Moving on. So assuming that we have that automation apocalypse brewing over the next 2 years, or I guess about a year and a half now, because November 2026 is about 18 months away. So what happens then? Then if we start seeing mass job loss, 50 to 70% jobs lost across many blue collar and white collar domains, you better believe that people are going to be upset about that, right? Like it's not like people are going to be arguing over other things when that's the main thing. Like, consider the last time we had a Great Depression. It was like entire elections were based on who's going to do something, right? That's how FDR got elected 4 terms. Now, granted, he was also a wartime president, so he went from Great Depression to World War II. Anyways, my point is that when economic agency goes down, political willpower goes up. If you're angry about money, your willingness to do more extreme things politically goes up. Fortunately, we have a mostly functional democracy, which means we don't need to get out Madame Guillotine like the French did during the French Revolution. We can just go out to the ballots. All right, so what I suspect would happen if this happens, again, this is all very conditional, if that happens, if we end up with significant job loss between now and 18 months from now, then UBI and what are you going to do about AI is going to emerge as a central issue. Now, like I said, there's going to be the Luddites. There's going to be the people who say, I don't care, shut it down, just keep my job, keep things the way that it is. But most people are probably going to read the writing on the wall and be like, you mean I just vote for this guy and I get $2,000 a month and then I can sit at home doing whatever? Sign me up, right? Like most people, like I know that some people are going to say like, I would, just keep my job, and gosh, every time there's an election, it's like, we're going to bring steel and coal jobs back. And then it never happens, right? Like politicians always say, we're going to bring jobs back. It rarely happens that way. So, between grassroots movement, hey, social media, I think that we're probably heading for a landslide election. Pro UBI, pro AI, where eventually there's an overwhelming consensus. We just need a new economic paradigm. This isn't going to work. I'm electing you to go do something, to go change something, and I think that that's what's going to happen. At least I think that is equally as possible as all the nonsense that they predicted in AI 2027, the paper. Step 3, government mandate. The government mandate comes with the new crop, the fresh crop. I don't know if it's going to be red or blue. It's going to be pro AI, right? That's what I'm hoping that we see is that it's going to be pro AI politicians all in early 2027. It could go the opposite way, right? Which is something that they didn't contemplate in AI 2027. What if the midterm elections go overwhelmingly anti-AI and you end up with a bunch of Luddites who are all sabotaging the system and saying, shut it down, more regulation, embargoes and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. That I think is equally as possible, maybe even more likely to happen, given how backwards thinking many Americans are. So who knows? Like we could very easily snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as they like to say in the political sphere here in America. We very well might just shoot ourselves in the foot just to spite the technology, just to stick it to the tech bros. Nothing is outside of the realm of possibility. So, however, if this situation plays out perfectly, then we have a government mandate in early 2027 saying, go all in on AI and blockchain and robots. Get me out of the workforce. I don't care anymore. Put a 3-year moratorium on mortgage evictions until we figure all this out, and put all the national assets on a blockchain, voting on a blockchain. Switch everything over to ASI as much as possible because it's going to be honest, it's going to be transparent, it's going to be open source, all those good things. We have billions and billions of specialized and general purpose AI agents handling all government functions. So the population of the government goes down to basically the watchers, right? Like elected officials who just, make sure that the AI is doing what we want it to. Everything is incentive aligned by virtue of the fact that all of our resources and all of our decisions are on the blockchain. And suddenly, here's the other thing with democratic oversight, the fact that a lot of people suddenly won't be working. Guess what has happened historically when you have a class of people who don't work? They pay a lot more attention to civics and politics. That was the entire premise of like Athens, Greece, ancient Athens, the golden age of Athens. The citizens didn't have normal jobs. They were soldiers at times, but other than that, they spent a lot of time debating in the Pnyx. They spent a lot of time focusing on politics. Same thing with the Roman patrician class, and then later just the upper class. So you have a whole bunch of people who are going to be now spending even more time online debating politics and looking at the blockchain and participating in civic engagement. Now, one of the most important things to consider is you're like, Dave, that sounds like a lot of work. But if we have ASI, it can do decades worth of programming work per week, right? Like, so is it actually that unreasonable? Like we already see the beginning of this with vibe coding, where someone in an hour can vibe code a game, right? Or vibe code a SaaS platform. Like, okay, so right now you can do several weeks worth of work in an afternoon. So take that out to its logical conclusion. In 2 years, 2.5 years, how much coding could a whole team do in a week? Like, I don't really see a problem. Like, I don't see that as really a technical barrier. So early 2027, as the new after the midterm elections, the government has a mandate. They say go all in on AI. UBI is the goal. Civic chain is the goal. Let's figure this out. Step 4, at the end of 2027, by December 2027, we have post-labor economics implemented, and fully automated luxury space communism is good. We wash our hands, we go home. It's all over and done with. Again, I don't think this is super realistic, but I think it's just as realistic, if not more realistic, than the AI 2027 paper. And the biggest difference is this narrative is something that people will work for, not the frightened little child, the big spooky bad AI that we used our imagination to build up as this boogeyman is going to come and hurt us all and take our allowance money, right? It's like there's actually another possibility. So, universal basic income, that seems to be pretty obvious. $2,000 a month today, that's enough to barely scrape by. But if technology is super deflationary and everything from rent and power and internet and food goes down by up to 90%, then that $2,000 will carry you a lot longer. Also, sorry, my voice is scratchy. It's still allergy season. So next up is post-labor economics. This is what I've been talking about for a while. If you're new to the channel and you're not familiar with post-labor economics, just do a Google search for post-labor economics. I'm not the only one talking about it, but I've produced a lot of content about it. Resource abundance, so there's a difference between post-scarcity and hyper-abundance. I don't really want to get into the weeds right now, but TLDR, cost goes down. Okay, cool. Now, I know some of you out there are like, what's the point of money in this situation? You still need money as a price signal to determine how much of every resource to produce. Even if the cost is trivial, you still need some price signals. So money's not going away anytime soon. Some things might just end up being free because the government might provide that good or service just at cost. So it's not even worth paying for. There's plenty of goods and services like that. Like if you call the police. Now, I'm not saying that the police are cheap. I'm saying that collectively society says we'll just pay for that. It's just better if we just pay for it. Blockchain governance, talked about that. Now, what I will say is that America, of any nation, is the most likely to pull this off. So let's actually talk about that. So from a technical standpoint, exponential scaling, that seems, pretty good, right? Algorithmic efficiency improving by 50% or more year over year. That's, okay, if that trend continues, it'll just keep going. So we've got the exponential takeoff. You guys, don't even need to think about that. We've seen it. It's existing. Recursive self-improvement is the one thing that we haven't really fully seen yet. This is kind of one of the next thresholds that OpenAI and others are looking at. But there is growing consensus. If you watch all the interviews with like Dario Amodei and oh gosh, my brain just blanked. But all the interviews out there with all the tech leaders, recursive self-improving agents might be here by the end of this year. And if all the tech leaders are saying that, then like this year or next year, if it was Elon time, that would be different. If Elon said, we'll have it in a few months, then it's like, okay, Elon, whatever. Because Elon is famous for overestimating how fast he can get things done. But if the rest of the tech industry is saying, yeah, it's a reasonable expectation that all coding could be done by machine by the end of this year, and recursive self-improvement could be done, next the year after, that seems reasonable. Next is blockchain. There's plenty of blockchain systems out there. Ethereum is already super mature. Sam Altman is working on WorldCoin. I really still don't think I don't like the idea of WorldCoin. I don't want Sam to scan my eyeballs. But whatever. The point is that there is a lot of maturity in blockchain. So the fundamental technologies are there: AI, blockchain, and so on. Then you add in robots. Robots are coming fast. And then we get to that tipping point. So those S-curves that I was talking about, those network effects, those tipping points, where once it gets to that point, it's just going to be the case to do this is going to be so much more compelling than the case not to do it. All right, so let's talk about the geopolitical and political and economic ramifications. So first and foremost, America, we actually have a really big superpower, and that is we can vote people like Trump into office. We can vote for very dramatic change relatively quickly. Now, the American government itself is designed to resist change, but at the same time, like if there is huge democratic consensus, if there is a democratic mandate for radical transformation, we can say that directly to the government, and we can pivot faster than any other nation can, namely adversaries like China and Russia, because in more authoritarian regimes, the entire regime has to pivot around the central figurehead, and their views, and they won't let the organization, they won't let the government change in a way that takes their power. If we elect a new senator, a new congressperson, new president, it's our show. So then, the decentralized architecture, this is something that actually came up a lot in the comments. I agree. So what I mean is many of you out there in the comments are saying, I don't want a single centralized ASI that's opaque and a big black box. I agree. I think that if you have ASI, it's not going to be monolithic. It's only monolithic in movies and books because it's easier to have one big bad Thanos-like character. AI is going to be decentralized. You're going to have open source ASI from Meta, from Google, from OpenAI. So you're going to have a bunch of different agents. ASI is going to be agents. Like it's going to be billions and trillions of agents. That's what it comes down to. But this also makes the whole system more resilient. Just in the same way that our energy grid is somewhat decentralized, even our federal system is decentralized. We have 50 states and a federal government. So I think that there are lots and lots of advantages to doing it this way. Incentive alignment, I've already talked about this from a game theory perspective. Also, innovation. Our private sector, the fact that we have the best R1 universities in the world, we have the best tech companies in the world, we have the best tech talent in the world. If anyone can pull it off, we can pull it off. We've been building up to this since the 1970s when Silicon Valley first became a thing. It's showtime, guys. It's prime time. Your number has been called. So Silicon Valley, can you stand up and actually produce this next iteration of democracy? And of course, first mover advantage. If America pulls this off first, then we just lurch ahead of every other nation for the next few centuries because we're going to be the ones to double down on democracy, on blockchain, and AI-based innovation. Let's see. I think this slide is actually probably redundant, so we can just we can gloss over it because I've already talked about all of this. So AI or blockchain to gatekeep the resources, that engineers the incentives to make it do what we want. You use blockchain consensus in order to ensure that human values are actually well understood and well expressed, and that if there's certain values that are fringe, they get downplayed, and if there's certain values that everyone agrees on, those get magnified. Transparency, that's the whole point of blockchain, is transparency as to what the AI is doing and where the resources are going, so on and so forth. All right, you get the idea. Now, finally, last slide is why won't this happen? So first and foremost, institutional paralysis. The American government is slow by design. It's reactive by design. It is designed to resist rapid change with checks and balances. And even with as much energy as Trump has to change those institutions, he's still getting stymied at every corner. So even if we vote overwhelmingly for an AI mandate, overhaul of the government during the midterms, it's just the midterms, right? That's not the whole government. That's like what? I think a third to a half of all politicians, depending on your state, are going to be up for re-election or change. But many of them aren't going to be. So even if you have a very powerful swell towards pro-AI, which I don't think is going to happen, I think you're going to have a huge anti-AI backlash as well. So then you say, okay, well, only a third of the politicians are going to be voted on during the midterms, or maybe half. And then of those, half of them are going to be pro-AI and half are going to be anti-AI. Nothing's going to change in the grand scheme of things. It's too optimistic to think that we're going to be that unified. We have seen that in history, namely with the election of people like FDR. But that's, even he was stymied by the courts and by Congress and those sorts of things. So it never plays out that way. It has never played out that way in history, where for every time you have a major issue, there are people that are for and against the new narrative. Next up is entrenched power. So this is the corporate giants, the tech elites, the billionaires, the millionaires. Anyone who stands to lose from regime change will fight these changes. And in many cases, and this has been true throughout all of history, is that the established elite, the wealthy elite, always fight what is new, unless they personally can benefit from it. But even then, many times they fight it even to their own detriment. Corporations in particular are guilty of this because rather than pivoting, because pivoting is very expensive and slow, they will fight to keep their profit model intact today, because corporations only think quarter to quarter. And fortunately, individual billionaires and millionaires can think a little bit longer terms, but corporations only think quarter to quarter because it's about shareholder value. Public skepticism. There's a bunch of idiots out there. That's all there is to it. There's a bunch of people who believe in misinformation. There's people who don't understand the technology. There's people who don't want change, that say don't change things. They just say keep things the way they are. Just keep my job. Give me my job back. I just want to keep going to my drudgerous, soul-sucking job because God forbid something changes and gets better. So don't underestimate the power of stupid people in large numbers. Technological immaturity is another thing. AI, blockchain, and robotics, they're all nearly there. They're not quite there yet. Like, to be completely fair, yes, AI has an IQ over 120 now. Everyone seems to agree that. It's only going to get smarter from here. But at the same time, it does still have gaps in abilities that we don't. We have memory figured out. We have long-term goal horizons figured out. AI doesn't have those figured out. It can figure out your problem in the immediate term. There was actually a recent chart that showed that the length of the amount of time that agents can go unsupervised has gone up exponentially, because back for GPT-2 it was like 2 seconds, and now for O1 Pro and O3 it's like 8 hours worth of work. So if that continues, then sure, the time horizon that they can work independently will go up from hours to days to weeks to months to years. But we're not there yet. It just doesn't exist yet. To be completely fair, it doesn't exist yet. It might exist, it might not. More often than not, these things don't pan out the way that we think that they will. But it's still an interesting point of view. And then finally, it's a fantasy, right? This scenario assumes perfect execution and coordination at all levels. In the same way that the AI 2027 paper assumes a comedy of errors and staggering incompetence and nobody paying attention over the next 3 years. So it's like, okay, yes, if you make worst case scenario assumptions, the AI 2027 paper makes sense. If you make best case scenario assumptions, then this video makes sense. My point is that if you deliberately exclude lots and lots of counterpoints, you can come up with any scenario in your head and it will seem plausible. So thanks for watching to the end. Have a good one. Cheers.